Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please, let's go to the headlines.
Tonight, breaking news as we come on the air, Iran strikes back, targeting the largest U.S. base in the Middle East. Multiple missiles intercepted. Tonight, President Trump's response, and just moments ago, the president now saying there could now be a ceasefire in the works. The breaking news and what our team has learned. Tonight, Iran firing a barrage of missiles at the largest U.S. base in the region. U.S. and Qatari interceptors heading them off. Several countries closing their airspace. The U.S. moving to protect more than 40,000 troops across the region. The president meeting with his national security team in the Oval Office as Iran began to retaliate. President Trump now suggesting regime change. Tonight, where is the supreme leader? And this evening here, we see new video of the B-2 bombers taking off in Missouri, headed for Iran to strike. And just in tonight, President Trump now signaling a ceasefire could be coming in just hours. Our team standing by across the region. Tonight, Martha Raddatz with the before and after images, how much damage was done in Iran. And tonight, the UN Nuclear Watchdog Agency now saying nearly 900 pounds of enriched uranium in Iran is unaccounted for. Did they move the uranium in the days before the attack? The other news this Monday night, the life-threatening heat back here in the U.S. More than 195 million Americans, nearly everyone east of the Rockies. Record highs and power outages tonight. More than a dozen people hospitalized at a graduation in New Jersey. The roads buckling in the heat. This one just as a driver was going over it. Ginger Z standing by with the forecast. Tonight, a second shark attack in just a matter of days in the same area off the East Coast. What we're learning at this hour. Tonight, stunning new images of deep space, the largest camera ever built, recording thousands of asteroids and millions of galaxies. And the new documentary tonight on Barbara Walters, Tell Me Everything, from Fidel Castro to Ronald Reagan, to that moment with Clint Eastwood that made her blush, to Lucille Ball. And we remember when she asked us to walk her to the studio on her final day, what she told us right here tonight. From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight.
Breaking tonight, right at the beginning of this show, President Trump saying Iran and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire. He says it will be phased in over 24 hours. We have yet to hear from the Iranians or the Israelis. It's overnight there. Also tonight, he is trying to make sure the price of oil does not rise dramatically following the U.S. airstrikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. President Trump will head to The Hague tomorrow for a NATO summit. Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy is already there tonight with the latest. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. President Trump didn't want to be out of the country for the tail end of the G7 last week because he needed to monitor the situation in Iran from the Situation Room at the White House. But with this ceasefire announcement tonight, there's expected to be enough of a break in the action that he will soon cross the Atlantic for this week's NATO summit.
He has prevented a nuclear conflict.
Today, President Trump watched Iran retaliate against a U.S. base in Qatar that he visited just last month.
Al-Udeid Air Base, sometimes referred to as the Deed.
Qatar has continued to act as the middleman during back-channel talks between the U.S. and Iran, and today the president said, "I'd like to thank the highly respected Emir of Qatar for all that he has done in seeking peace for the region." But the president is still concerned about oil prices and roughly 20% of the world's oil and natural gas shipments getting stuck if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz.
Even the threat is increasing the price of oil. The Iranian people need it in order to survive for their own economic benefits or not thereof.
Iran, they need the revenue from oil. China wants their oil, they get it at a deep discount.
Ahead of President Trump's visit to the NATO summit tomorrow, one country is already saying they won't be spending more on defense: Spain.
You're normalizing the fact that certain powers are bombing each other, that their leaders exchange nuclear threats, and that the civilian population is the one suffering all these consequences.
So far, 22 of 32 NATO member states pay 2% of their GDP, as expected, but the president plans to pressure them to start spending 5%.
The president has been adamant, and our NATO allies.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Yomes.
And good evening. Tonight we start with breaking news as we come on the air. President Trump calling for a ceasefire between Israel and Iran to be phased in over the next 24 hours. This comes as Iran hits back, launching retaliatory strikes at a major base in Qatar housing about 10,000 U.S. personnel. Iran responding with short and medium-range missiles targeting Al Udeid Air Base. Thankfully, there were no known injuries or casualties. The move, a response to the U.S. strikes on nuclear facilities. You can see here the impact from those B-2 bombers. U.S. bases in the region tonight on alert, closing airspace not just in Qatar, but in Bahrain and Iraq. Israel launching more strikes within Iran today. Iran continuing their campaign against Israel. You can see here an explosion at a power station in Ashdod. President Trump weighing in, calling Iran's response, quote, very weak. We've got full team coverage starting in Tel Aviv with Richard Engel. And Richard, I want to get right to that breaking news. What more do we know about President Trump's call for a ceasefire?
Well, Tom, it was less of a call as more of a unilateral announcement. He said that Israel and Iran have completely agreed to a ceasefire, that it will begin over the course of the next several hours, and that within 24 hours it will be over, that it will mark the end of what he described as the 12-day war. We have heard nothing from Israel, no comment from Israeli officials, nor anything from Iranian officials, and it came just hours after Iran responded militarily with an attack on a U.S. base.
Iran strikes back, launching missiles on a U.S. military base in Qatar.
Those missiles were down. That will tensions in the Middle East cool down.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm John Dickerson.
I'm Maurice Dubois.
President Trump says Israel and Iran have agreed to what he calls a complete and total ceasefire.
This comes after Iran retaliated today against an American attack on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend. Iran sent missiles across the Persian Gulf, targeting Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar.
That's the largest American military installation in the Middle East. Thousands of U.S. troops are stationed there. President Trump on social media said that Iran provided early warning, which led to no Americans being wounded.
The president says Iran's nuclear facilities have been obliterated. We have reports from the Middle East and Washington. Nancy Cordes at the White House begins our coverage. Nancy?
Maurice, the president's announcement comes just a few hours after that Iranian attack that appears to have been designed to avoid casualties, essentially a face-saving move so the Iranians could say they retaliated against the U.S. without drawing more U.S. fire. Cameras.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Bennett. Amna Navaz is away. On the NewsHour tonight, President Trump announces a ceasefire between Israel and Iran hours after Iran launched missiles at a U.S. base in the Middle East in retaliation for the strikes on its nuclear facilities. New York City prepares to vote in the Democratic mayoral primary that could have national implications.
In many ways, they represent the two poles that are vying for the direction and the compass of the National Democratic Party.
And Alaska's Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski discusses her new memoir about adapting to Washington politics and the Trump era.
When I'm here in Washington, D.C., I feel not only physically far from home, but just kind of, I'm away from who I am, my identity, my roots.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The United Nations is warning of a spiral of chaos after the United States joined Israel's war on Iran by attacking 3 Iranian nuclear sites. U.S. stealth B-2 bombers dropped 14 bunker buster bombs, each weighing 30,000 pounds, the largest non-nuclear bombs ever dropped by the United States. The U.S. Navy also deployed 30 submarine-launched Tomahawk cruise missiles. President Trump ordered the attack without seeking congressional approval. The Trump administration briefed some public figures ahead, but no Democrats.
I read clear facility complete totally obliterated.
It will decry the U.S. attack as a grave violation of international law, warning it'll result in everlasting consequences. Iran has long said its nuclear program is solely for civilian purposes.
Breaking news this Monday night. Word of a ceasefire after Iran launches missiles towards American air bases.
Wanted to be proportionate and yet de-escalate.
What President Trump is claiming tonight and how Iran is responding. Canada's new security and defense deal with the European Union, what it will allow Canada to do faster. The heat is on, dangerously. The blistering temperatures baking parts of Ontario and Quebec. Plus, a Canadian hotshot makes history.
It's hard to believe that I'm part of that mission.
How NBA star Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has slam dunked his way into an elite club.
Professional Donna Friesen.
Iran had said it would fight back, and it did, firing missiles at Qatar, targeting an American airbase in the Persian Gulf, the largest U.S. military installation in the region. And then late today, President Donald Trump announced what he says is a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. Congratulations to everyone, he wrote. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. It sounds definitive, but there are lots of qualifiers about the timing, and it is unclear what exactly Iran and Israel have agreed to.
For France 24, live from Stockholm and on France 24 news programs.
Paul Rees, one of the 224 correspondents around the world.
Hello and a warm welcome to you. If you're just joining us, you're watching Daybreak, and this is the top story this Tuesday. Iran says it is ready to hold fire if Israel does. US President Donald Trump hailing a truce that he said would begin with Iran stopping its attacks first and Israel following 12 hours later. Ahead of that US announced timeline, 7 people killed in There is no ceasefire agreement as such, but that if Israel stops its attacks, then Tehran has no intention to continue its strikes. US President Donald Trump said a truce would begin as of 4 a.m. GMT, so should now be underway. Trump said it would see Iran be the first to stop the fighting, followed by Israel some 12 hours from now.
This is Asia Now.
It's 11 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong. Good morning. I'm Ronnie Samtani. At this hour, U.S. President Donald Trump declares a complete and total ceasefire between Israel and Iran. But Tehran denies such agreement, with its foreign minister saying strikes will only stop if Tel Aviv ends its attacks. Israel has not confirmed the ceasefire. Thailand's army seals more border crossings to stop the flow of trade. Tension in Cambodia escalate over a third hour. And China hosts top political and business leaders in the northern city of Tianjin. And tense and shifting global trade flows set the tone at the World Economic Forum. Today, Israeli health authorities say at least 7 people have been killed by strikes in Israel, just hours after US President Donald Trump announced a ceasefire between the two countries. The opening and closing of airspace over the Middle East causes travel chaos across the globe. The Safety Commissioner urges the government to include YouTube in its planned social media ban for young people. And Virgin Australia returns to the ASX during a period for international travel. Hello, welcome to ABC News. I'm Ross Childs. Health authorities say the death toll from Iranian strikes in southern Israel has risen to 7, just hours after US President Donald Trump announced 5.
country.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock. Our top story. Donald Trump says that Israel and Iran have agreed to a complete and total ceasefire, but only after an intense night of violence.
But Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky speaks exclusively to Sky News and warns that British companies are still helping to arm Russia.
It's Tuesday, the 24th of June. Your headlines. Donald Trump hails the end of what he calls the 12-day war between Israel and Iran.
As he heads to the NATO summit in the Netherlands, the US president is claiming his biggest foreign policy win.
At least 3 Israelis killed as Iran launches 6 waves of ballistic missiles in the early hours of this morning.
Also ahead, Ukraine's president tells Sky News that weapons components from the UK are finding their way into Russia despite sanctions.
Of course, UK companies never delivered a weapon to Russia. Of course not. But there are some components from some companies.
And nearly 100 Labour MPs join a rebellion against the government's plan to cut disability benefits. A very good morning to you. The US President Donald Trump says Israel and Iran have agreed to a complete total ceasefire. State television.
On DW.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. Donald Trump says Iran and Israel have agreed to a total ceasefire. In a post on Truth Social, the U.S. president says the ceasefire will begin in the coming hours, effectively ending the days-long conflict. Israel's minister of the country is carrying unprecedented strikes on what he called agencies of government repression in Iran. He confirmed that Israel hit the notorious Evin prison in Tehran. Iranian media say Israel has bombed roads around the underground Fordo nuclear site to obstruct access. Air raid sirens were also heard across Israel. Secretary General Mark Rutte says allies will agree during this week's summit to spend 5% of their GDP on defense. It's a key demand of U.S. President Donald Trump, who has long complained he used much for negotiated exemption, having called the target unreasonable. This is DW News from Berlin. You'll find more online. Check it out, dw.com.
We are a promise. We are ambition. We shall. Africa now has its own voice.
news.
Mali and Russia signed agreements on Monday to bolster their economic and trade relations, including a cooperation deal on nuclear energy. Mali's interim president Assimi Goïta met Russian President Vladimir Putin during a 5-day official visit to Moscow. Unfortunately, the volume of turnover between our countries is still very modest, but firstly, it has a good tendency to grow. Secondly, what is important is that there is a good direction for promising cooperation. This is about geological exploration, development of natural resources, this is about energy, about logistics, and the humanitarian areas which I just mentioned. Goïta's visit to Moscow comes shortly after Russian paramilitary group Wagner left Mali. It was replaced by the Africa Corps, an organization managed by the Russian government. Countries of the Alliance of Sahel states have increasingly turned to Russia to fight jihadist groups. Attacks against military facilities have intensified in Mali in recent weeks. Earlier in June, the Kremlin said it planned to boost economic and military cooperation with African countries. 3 police officers in Kenya have been charged on Monday with the murder of Albert Ojwang. The 31-year-old blogger died in police custody earlier this month, an event that triggered nationwide protests. Arrested after Kenya Chief Eliud Lagat accused the blogger of defaming him on social media. Lagat stepped aside for the duration of the investigations into Ojwang's death. He has denied any wrongdoings. The 3 officers were charged alongside 3 civilians. All 6 suspects arraigned on Tuesday. Authorities initially claimed Ojwang died from but a post-mortem later revealed evidence fueled public anger. Tension escalated further after police shot a street vendor at Close Ranch during a demonstration in Nairobi on June 17th. He remains hospitalized in critical condition. Activists are planning a nationwide shutdown on Wednesday to protest against police violence and mark the anniversary of last year's deadly crackdown on anti-tax demonstrations. Albert Ojwang's death has become a rallying point for growing frustration with Kenyan security forces accused of operating with impunity. Calls for accountability and justice are mounting across the country.
Africa may be thousands of kilometers from the Israel-Iran conflict, but experts warn the ripple effects will be felt across the continent. From potential trade disruptions to soaring market stability, African economies are already feeling pressure and is unlikely to ease anytime soon.
The prices for energy goods like oil, petroleum is going to rise, and that is going to affect many African countries that primarily rely on the fossil fuel to run their industries and to power their cars, the transport industry and factories.
Goldman Sachs already meanwhile, the threat of the Strait of Hormuz closure, controlled by Iran, can send oil prices skyrocketing.
Africa has to take up a strategic repositioning to understand the dynamics of the conflict and what it means for them domestically. And this means talking to populations around what is expected and what the likelihood of this conflict is going to be.
With oil prices potentially rising, sub-Saharan Africa may face inflation and fuel, adding pressure to economies already struggling with global uncertainties.
Iran launched missiles attacks Monday on a U.S. military base in Qatar, retaliating for the American bombing of its nuclear sites, escalating tensions in the volatile region. Shortly after the attack, the Gulf nation of Bahrain, that is home to the U.S. 5th Fleet headquarters, temporarily suspended flights in its airspace, which is similar to what Qatar did before it was hit. Qatar condemned the attack on Al Udeid air base attack, but said it successfully intercepted the missiles and no casualties were reported. It said its airspace is now safe. Iran said the attack in Qatar matched the number of bombs dropped by the United States on its nuclear sites over the weekend, signaling its likely desire to de-escalate.
Thousands of Iranians took to the streets of Tehran on Sunday in a show of anger and defiance following US airstrikes on 3 key nuclear sites in Iran. Protesters called for a robust response from the Iranian government and denounced what he has continued effort by foreign powers to undermine Iran's sovereign right to peaceful nuclear energy. The attack was an act of cowardice. Peaceful possession of nuclear energy is our undeniable right. The US and Israel will never succeed in getting these goals. The US has no right to condone this aggression, no right to tell us what to do or not to do. Iran must respond forcefully to this aggression and punish them for their mistakes. We must slam the US has so it doesn't repeat this mistake. In a televised address, the Supreme Leader said the country would not let the crimes go unanswered. Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here. Only on GB News.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we are going and where we are, with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay. Because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, very good morning to you.
In the last few minutes, Donald Trump has said a ceasefire is now in effect in the Middle East, as he urged both Israel and Iran not to violate it. Are we stepping away from the brink following days of global uncertainty?
Well, his announcement last night was somewhat overshadowed as reports came in that missiles continue to be fired from both sides. 3 people dead.
This prepares for a NATO summit in the Netherlands, where member states, including the UK, are expected to agree to spend 5% of GDP on defence.
Mobile phones. Do you think today's youth spend much time on them? Of course you do. We'll be learning about a new school rating system which aims to tackle that and get that sort of usage under control. How are they going to do it? We'll find out with us.
As Venice locals protest Jeff Bezos' extortionate wedding, we're asking, have weddings become too extravagant?
Didn't you tell us?
Yes, is the short answer.
Crystal Palace look fine to play in Europe now as New York Jets owner Woody Johnson buys a 43% stake in them. Could Tommy Fleetwood's loss be Europe's Ryder Cup gain? And also England need 350 runs to beat India on the last day of a thrilling first test at Headingley. England great Sir Andrew Strauss will join us shortly.
A lot of cloud and some outbreaks of rain out there this morning.
Thank you very much for giving time to Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Have a good life. Bye-bye.